guess I'll start with the public admission. As the athletic director at Chardon High School, I'm not unaccustomed to speaking in public, but this is the first time I've spoken on this topic, so you may need to bear with me. I'm here because Chardon experienced every educator's worst nightmare. And we're going to focus on healing that sports provided for our community rather than to talk about the events of 2/27. It's been very well documented what happened that day. I will mention two things that saved a lot of lives that day. One, obviously, would be the heroic actions of Coach Hall, who chased the shooter out of the school. The other is that we have a plan in place for something like this to happen. I met the sheriff earlier, and he knows very well how important this is. A couple years before 2012, we had a drill at Chardon High School where we brought in, we went through the whole lockdown procedure. We had a staged shooter that was released in the school. We brought the law enforcement agents in. We got the SWAT team in, and our school went into a full lockdown drill on that day. And as you can imagine, it was overwhelming and alarming at the time. And there were some students and some members of our staff who said, what are we doing? Why would we ever need anything like this? Well, I can tell you that on February 27th, thank God we did it, because it saved many lives. When we did go into the lockdown, the students knew what to do, the teachers knew what to do, and within a couple of minutes, the hallways were eerily quiet. I ended up being on a 911 call, and the only two people that were out and about were myself and Coach Hall after he chased the shooter out of the school. So the halls were completely empty and completely silent, and because everyone knew what to do, many, many lives were saved. About 4 years ago, one of our students organized a cheering section. He's a big Duke fan, and the cheering section for Duke basketball games, as you may know, is referred to as the Cameron Crazies. Well, this young man graduated in 07 or 08, and he organized our student section and named them the Chardon Crazies. And you'll hear me refer to them from time to time throughout the next few minutes here. But it's the Chardon Crazies were very important in our healing process because they were organized a couple years before the tragedy, and they have a name, they have t-shirts. I'll explain a little bit more about it as we go, but that sense of togetherness that the student section provided was invaluable, and you'll see also that it provided our kids as a way to thank the many, many people who provided support. I mentioned that we did have a plan in place. We discovered after the shooting that the plan ended with the evacuation of the high school. The shooting occurred shortly after 7:30 on Monday morning, February 27th, and by the time everything had settled down a little bit, around noon that day, all the students were evacuated, all the teachers were evacuated, and there were 4 people left in the school. Our principal, Andy Fetchick, our assistant principal, Michael Sedlak, myself, and our chief of police. And we're sitting down in the main office trying to wrap our brain around what just happened, and all of a sudden, Andy, the principal, said, now what do we do? And that's when it occurred to us that our plan, which was extremely effective, ended with the evacuation of the school. As you can imagine, there was a lot of work to do following the shooting. And I'm not too proud to say, we just kind of made it up as we went along from there. And we had a lot of help with a lot of people. While we were figuring it out, the support just rolled in amazing ways and amazing amounts from all across the country. We had banners, cards, people sending cakes, you can imagine that. Coach Hall got more knitted scarves than one man could ever wear in years. But there were just so many things. By the time, within 1 week of the shooting, every student in our high school, again, 1,100, had a handmade card taped to his or her locker. From elementary students, those were the best. With that phonetic spelling and some of the things that they wished. I'm sorry you're sad. I hope you have a good pizza, and things like that. And it's the sentiment that counts. Every student had a handmade card, and there were literally boxes and boxes and boxes of cards that we quite frankly had no idea what to do with. That came from all across the country. We received a beautiful banner that was signed by all the students from Columbine High School. As you can imagine, that would get our seniors in 2012 were in kindergarten when their shooting occurred. So it showed you how quickly time does. But you know, the support that we felt from around the country and really around the world was overwhelming and very helpful to us. I heard the United Way mentioned within days of our shooting, our local Geauga County United Way started a healing fund that since February 2012 has raised over $1 million that is divided among the victims' families. It's for some mental health and counseling at the high school and just a variety of different things. And this is when I knew how powerful sports could be. Within a couple of weeks of the shooting, 2 schools in our conference, Willoughby South and East Lake North, they're combined school district. There's 2 high schools in the district, Willoughby South, East Lake North. They view each other much like Defiance and Napoleon view each other. Necessary evil. We have to play a couple times a year, but you know, of course we want to beat them. So there's no love lost between those 2 schools. This happened during the end of basketball season, so the football teams from the 2 schools with their athletic departments staged a fundraising basketball game and raised $32,000 in one night for the Chardon Healing Fund, and their athletic director brought the check down. And that's when I knew sports is going to be a very critical component of our healing. And you know, it's changed the relationships that we have with our schools and our conference. You know, our kids used to say, "Oh, I hate Madison," or "I hate Riverside." Well, they don't say that much anymore because the outpouring of support was so great that we realized that they are truly friendly rivals. So that's one positive that has really resulted from this, and there are many more. As I mentioned, our shooting occurred on Monday. Our school, as you can imagine, was closed on Tuesday and Wednesday. We had an open house on Thursday morning where the students and their parents could come in and tour the school and just kind of re-enter the school. And as you might imagine, that was a very emotional and traumatic experience for a lot of kids and their parents, and quite frankly, a lot of us teachers as well. That occurred on Thursday. We also had a sectional basketball game that was scheduled for the night of the shooting, and that was delayed until that Thursday as well. So school didn't resume again until Friday of that week. And if you think about it, you have a shooting in a school on a Monday, and class back in session on Friday, is a pretty short window. So as I look back on it, I wonder how prepared we were. And you know, the answer to this is, as I'm sure you know, you can't be prepared for that. But the experts that worked with us said that the sooner you can get back to quote-unquote normal, the better off you'll be. So we opened the doors on Thursday for an open house, and we had a first day of school again on Friday. So you can imagine that was not a normal day. It wasn't normal for quite some time. One of the things that the United Way did was, it's been proven that after a traumatic incident like this, therapy dogs provide a lot of comfort to a lot of kids. So we had some groups in the area that brought their therapy dogs in, and they would just be out in the halls between classes and study halls, that kind of thing, where the kids come up and pet the dogs. It's amazing what the effect of these therapy dogs have on young people. There was one dog in particular that will always stick in our minds. It was like part Shetland pony, part some type of dog that I can't even identify. It was about this tall and a little hairy, and I thought it smelled a little funny. Well, the curious thing about this dog is that apparently had not been in school before, because every time a bell rang for classes dismissed, this dog pooped. Nobody was ready for that. So the bell for first period rings. The dog does his thing. Call custodians. You got to clean up an aisle too. You think, well, glad that's out of the way. Second period bell rings. Raise the dog. Clean up an aisle too. As you can imagine, that dog was invited out of the school by about noon that day. There a lot of other therapy dogs that came back, but the Shetland pony was not. I told you, it's funny the things that you do remember. Boys basketball was the first real sporting event that allowed our kids to come together. As I mentioned, we were scheduled to play a sectional game on Monday, the night of the shooting. That was postponed until Thursday. We practiced off-site. We were concerned about media. They were great. Don't get me wrong. They were sensitive. They were cooperative. They were courteous. They were fantastic. But we felt an obligation to kind of shield our students from the microphones. CNN was in Chardon, and ABC, and you name it, they were all there. News helicopters. It was surreal. So we practiced off-site in another school district, and by the time that open house ended on Thursday morning, we had 6 buses worth of students that had signed up to travel from Chardon High School to Euclid, which is about 30 miles away, for our sectional game. They all dressed in red. The leader of our student section, the Chardon Crazies, he'll call red out, white out, or our school colors. You can see it red and black. He'll call a red out, white out, or black out, and then all the kids dressed in that color. Because we're a somewhat rural school for our area at least, he'll also once in a while call a hick out, where they wear their overalls and straw hats, because we're considered to be the hillbilly school in our area. So while this healing was going on shortly after the shooting, every game was a red out. So we had 6 buses worth of kids that went to this basketball game, and there were countless others who drove. There were literally 500 to 700 kids, all dressed in red, attending this basketball game on Thursday evening. And remember, we had not been back in school yet. We, as luck would have it, I guess, we played a conference school, Madison, who I mentioned earlier, and we had played them twice during the year. 2 very equal teams. They beat us by 1. Madison, when we played the Chardon, we beat them by 3 or 4. So it was 2 very even teams. On that particular night, we won by 19 points because our kids just felt this incredible wave of support, and there was absolutely no way that we could possibly lose that game. Half the Madison section was dressed in red. So imagine being a 17-year-old kid taking the floor for Madison, and you look over and you see 700 Chardon kids in red, knowing what has happened in their school 3 days earlier. You look over in your student section, and you see half of your kids wearing red. So part of me felt bad for the Madison kids, because they were really in a no-win situation. I don't even think Madison people wanted them to win. Their head coach, a friend of mine, he said at the press conference afterwards, somebody asked him, well, Coach, how did it feel going up against Chardon? And everybody wanted Chardon to win. And he said, well, I know now how Darth Vader felt. So, we did win that game. And our kids played great, and it was a way for our kids to be kids again. It was the first time that they'd really been together, having fun and smiling since the shooting. And then this was on Thursday night, and we're back in school again on the next day on Friday, which, as you can imagine, was a very unforgettable day. There was not much academics performed that day. It was mostly just a lot of hugs, a lot of handshakes, a lot of tears, that kind of thing. Excuse me. We also played another game on that Saturday against a school in our area, Lyndhurst Brush High School, and they were considerably better than we were. They were bigger, they were faster, they were stronger, they had won 17 or 18 games, and I thought to myself, if our kids win this game, it will truly be a miracle. Well, wouldn't you know it, at the end of the first quarter, we're only down by 2 or 3, and our kids are thinking, hey, maybe we can do this. At halftime, we're up by 5, and nobody in the gym can believe what's going on. At the end of the third quarter, we're down 3 or 4, and to make a long story short, they pulled away at the end and beat us by 11 or 12. But the healing power of those 2 basketball games really set the tone of togetherness that our kids need. And our kids really led the way in getting us back on our feet. As we know as adults, sometimes young people are much more resilient than we are, and we lived that every day for probably 6 or 7 months. And it carried over into our baseball season that year. In the spring of 2012, we were anticipating a pretty good baseball season. We had a very senior-dominated team. We thought we would be good. We didn't know how good. We lost one of our first 2 games, and there was a lot of uncertainty around the team. All of our athletes and coaches had to make a lot of decisions. I won't use the word distracting because that's not respectful enough, but it was, they had to make a lot of non-sport decisions. Do we want to put ribbons on our hats? Do we want to put some kind of ribbon, embroider a ribbon on the jersey, those kind of things. And we decided that for the rest of the 2012 year and for the first part of the next school year, that we would commemorate it with a moment of silence. And football team had stickers on their helmets, and the baseball team, there were ribbons and that type of thing. So there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the baseball season. As I said, they lost one of the first 2, and then they felt a sense of purpose. I've talked to a lot of kids on the team, and they felt like they were playing for something bigger than themselves, which translated into 22 wins in a row. And just one carried into another, and we blew teams out. We came from behind. We beat teams that we had no business beating. Our 4th and 5th pitchers were throwing 1 and 2 hitters. It was just amazing what this togetherness brought out of these kids. The crowds grew as the winning streak went on, and we went into the OHSAA tournament. And we were a Division I school, and we made it to the regional finals, which in Defiance probably might be an unsuccessful season, but for the Chardon Hilltoppers, Division I regional finals was about as good as far as we've ever gone. And I talked to a lot of kids on the team, as I mentioned, and they said that the best thing about the whole season is that when they were on the field, everything felt normal. And it didn't feel normal in our high school for a long time, and it's just now getting back to feeling somewhat normal. So baseball was, one kid described it as a sanctuary, which I thought was a pretty profound way to describe it for a 16-year-old kid. Our football season this past fall, a year ago now, we were coming off 2 consecutive 4 and 6 seasons. Again, we had a pretty nice class of athletes going through. We thought we would be a lot better. We didn't know how much. We ended up finishing 8 and 2. We made it to the regional finals, and that was 13 weeks of football where our students could go in red out, white out, and cheer and laugh and have fun, and you could literally feel the healing that was occurring at these games. I mentioned Madison before. The Madison kids during that basketball game 3 days after the shooting wore a black, they're called blue and white, they wore black t-shirts for warm-ups that said Chardon on it. And when they were introduced, each Madison basketball player trotted over and handed a shirt to a Chardon player. And you're watching that, and how are we supposed to try to keep these guys now? And I was standing next to a guy, and their cheerleaders had red bows in their hair, and the guy said to me, how many ways are there to be next? And that's a question I'll always remember, because the answer that I discovered is countless. So Madison came around, and our kids have never forgotten that. And it was always a little bit more of a heated rivalry with Madison, and our kids never forgot what the Madison students and community did for us. So on the Madison football game, as I mentioned, they're called the blue and white. It was kind of a hush-hush thing. They called a blue out. So all of our kids wore blue. They wore a blue t-shirt over a white t-shirt. And before the game, our PA announcer gave us something to read. We said we want to thank Madison for all the kindness that they've shown during this trying time, blah, blah. And then we'd like to direct attention to the north end zone, where 500 kids from Chardon High School dressed in blue, and they had a couple thank you Madison chants, and it was excuse me, it worked. There was a dry-eyed voice. And the football coach and I laughed a little bit because, how football games are. There's 10 testosterone through the roof. The Madison team comes charging out of the locker room, and they're all, hitting each other, and they have punching each other in the gut, and like, and all of a sudden, they look down in our student section, and they're all dressed in blue, and you could just see the air go out of the Madison football blue. So the football coach pulled me aside and said, hey, how about we do that next week again? I don't know if we can pull that off again. So, you know how those of you who are basketball fans know LeBron James, when he's introduced, throws the rosin powder up in the air. So on a count of 3, they all had some baby powder, threw it up in the air, and then there was this big cloud of white in the end zone. And while the powder was in the air, they took off the blue shirts, and when the powder settled, the Chardon crazies were in a whiteout. And I don't need to tell you that, we did win that game. That's why the coach wanted to do it again the next week. So, today is the first day of sports for the fall. We're still in a period of uncertainty. We don't know really what to expect. We're still healing. There's no doubt about that. We're in a position now where we'll never forget what's happened. We miss our students and classmates that are gone. Our kids have been changed forever. Our school's been changed forever. Our community's been changed forever. But we're kind of at the point now where we really need to move forward. At the beginning of this school year, in a few weeks, we'll reach a point where half our student body, freshmen and sophomores, were not in the school on the day of the shooting, which I think is a healthy thing. So each month is a little easier, each day is a little easier. We're hoping this year was a little easier, and through the power of sports, through the incredible outreaching of our surrounding communities, we've come a long way in a very short time. So I can't really see what that clock says. It might be 1 o'clock. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. If you need to leave, I certainly won't be offended. I'm a teacher. I know that when the bell rings, I may be in mid-sentence, and I look up and that's when it's it won't hurt my feelings if you need to leave. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Doug, how did the coach convince that kid to leave the building? Tell us a little bit about that. It was your basketball coach, right?
It was Coach Frank Halls was an assistant football coach.
Okay.
He's since gone to another school as the head coach, another school in our league. And he's gone home. It's his alma mater. So we play them week 10. So you can imagine how powerful that's going to be. The answer to your question is he's got a very deep, resounding voice, and he yelled no. This is after the shooter had shot 3 kids. He yelled no. And the kid looked at him, and Frank was running at him, and he pulled the gun at him and fired a shot at Frank, and he dove behind a pop machine, and most of us would have stayed right there. And nobody would have followed Frank had he stayed right there. Well, that's not how Frank operates. So he got out from behind the machine, ran at the kid again, chased the kid out of the cafeteria, and there's a long, I don't know, probably 40 yards corridor, chased him down that corridor and out. He shot another kid on the way out, and Coach Hall chased the kid out of the doors at the other end of that corridor. And Coach Hall's a pretty big guy, so he was, I'm sure, huffing and puffing by then. And then he had to make a decision: do I continue to chase the kid, or do I go back into school? And he decided to go back into school, and he tended to the injured students at that point. And by the time he had gotten back to the cafeteria, the only other person who was not in a lockdown room was me. I was on a 911 call, and our technology at Chardon High School is not quite as modern as we would like it, so I'm on a phone it's a landline, it's a cord phone, so I can only go as far as that cord. So Frank was tending to the injured students, and he's the only one in the cafeteria that's moving around, and I'm on the phone with the 911 operator, and he's coming back and forth. And we listened to, my son and I listened to the 911 call a few days later, and it was like an out-of-body experience. Ended up being a 13-minute phone call that seemed like a week. And I talked to Sheriff earlier. It's funny the things you remember. We're partners with our law enforcement agencies, and by the time No, our Chardon PD was there, all the local police departments, the Ohio State Patrol was there. They brought a SWAT team, you know, it was like, within no time at all, on the phone, that seemed forever. And I remember Officer Matt DeLisa was the first face I saw, and our main office is right by the front doors, and I saw Officer DeLisa coming up. He had his full gear on, but somehow I knew it was him, and I just put the phone down. I told Clay, sorry, I gotta go, and I ran down and let him in. So, that's a long answer to your question, but Frank chased the kid out the door at the other end, and then probably 10 minutes later, 11 minutes later, the law enforcement came in, and shortly after, they made a sweep of the building, and shortly after that, the emergency crews came in.
They apprehended him how quickly?
It was a while. Our community we're 1,300 feet above sea level, above Cleveland, so we're up on a big hill. Our nickname's the Hilltoppers. Very clever, I know. So this kid goes out the door, and he cuts through this woods, and it's probably 1.5 to 2 miles that he went through the woods. It's February. When he got out of the woods, he was soaked from his waist down. He had hypothermia, and he just sat on the edge of this road. He had a semi-automatic gun with 10 rounds in it. Those were all fired. He had a knife, and his gun was reloaded. And he was just sitting on the curve of this road. He happened to live on the road. It's a somewhat rural road, and he was just sitting there. And a car came upon him, and as you can imagine, it seemed unusual to see a teenage kid just sitting there on the side of the road at 8 o'clock in the morning. So they pulled up and rolled the window down and said, "Are you all right?" And the kid looked at whoever it was and said, "I just did something really bad." And so they called 911, and shortly thereafter, they arrested him without incident. And he got in the car and handcuffed him, and on the way in, they questioned him, and one of the questions was, I don't know if it was in the car or later, but why did you do it? I don't know. So he was arrested shortly thereafter, gun fully loaded, knife, without incident. Any other questions? You've been a great audience.